a lot of confusion in the market about your products. So if you could clarify to us which kind of which kind of investments can I withdraw from?
Okay.
Because people say they invested in a product and then when it's time to withdraw, they are told, no, you cannot withdraw.
Okay, good question, Lynn. As I said at the beginning, we have around 10 different funds, but the core funds are usually three. There's what you call the liquidity product. That's the Cytonn money market fund. Offers around 10 to 11%. You can come in and out anytime. When you go into that fund, your interest is to earn a better return than you would get in a bank, but be able to access the money at any particular time, because return and liquidity go opposite directions. The higher the return, the lower the liquidity. The higher the liquidity, the lower the return. So if you take Cytonn money market fund, it has very high liquidity, but moderate return, around 10%. So that's a liquidity product. In the middle, we have what I would call the moderate product. You get a little bit of a higher return than the money market. Money market gives you 10%. Cytonn high yield fund gives you 14%. So you're getting a higher return, but then your liquidity will also drop. So when you come into the Cytonn high yield fund, you are locked in for 3 months so that we deploy that money into a commercial activity that can support the 14%. After the 3 months, you can always withdraw. Your interest, you can always withdraw anytime. Star 8 or 9 hash, you will always withdraw your interest.
Star 8 or 9 hash.
You will withdraw your interest from the Cytonn high yield fund. The same star 8 or 9 hash, you'll be able to withdraw both your interest and principal from the Cytonn money market fund. Then now, the highest yielding product, and that's why it's called Cytonn high yield solutions, which is privately placed, again according to regulations. That particular product will give you up to 18%, a very high yield. But to get the 18, I cannot get the 18 by taking the money and putting in a bank or putting in another money market fund. I have to invest. And the place we have chosen to invest is in real estate. So when I put it into real estate, to get that high yield, I have to take some liquidity risk. That means there is a risk that I cannot get the money anytime I want. Yeah. Now, especially when something like COVID happens, we have sold units. If you take, let's say, between Alma and the Ridge, clients owe us about 1.6 billion. There's no chance of that money getting lost because we have the units until they pay us in full. But when something like COVID happens and we had sold a unit, let's say, to a restaurateur, obviously they can't be able to pay us. If we had sold a unit, let's say, to an events management entrepreneur, of course they're not going to be able to pay that unit. They will ask for time. When they ask for time, when they ask for time to pay their units, the project has to then go and ask the fund for time. The same way the project goes and asks banks for time. You've heard about banks restructuring billions of loans. That's the same thing CHYS has done. It has restructured the loan for the borrowers, and the borrowers are our own internal project. That trauma, so to speak, then has to go to the individual investor, and the individual investor is then told by their own board. Remember, the people making decisions are the same at the board of investors that they elected, that look, we have to extend a 1-year moratorium to these projects. The same way registered banks are extending 1-year moratorium. CHYS is a private bank. It's going to extend a 1-year moratorium to these projects. As I said, 98% of investors understand and have accepted that 1-year loan restructuring. Around 2% want out of that restructuring. Now, you can't want a return and not be able to bear the risks of that return. If I want liquidity, I go to the Cytonn Money Market Fund, where the vast majority of our investors are, 14,000 investors. They come in and out as they want. That's if I want high liquidity. If I want moderate liquidity, moderate return, I go into the Cytonn high yield fund. You will never find any investor there who is unhappy. If I want the highest yield, it comes with some liquidity risk, which for the first time in the 7-year existence of that fund, it's the first time that it's done a loan restructuring, which is very similar to what every other bank has done.
This is the first time in 7 years?
This is the first time in 7 years, and it's COVID driven because people cannot pay their units as fast as they used to pay. So if you are to ask me, Lynn, it's ordinary business. But again, remember, there's no other real estate fund that is borrowing directly from individuals and putting into real estate. So no fund has done the same extension as we have done. The only other people that have done extensions are banks themselves. But remember, banks can always go to central bank for liquidity.
Yes, exactly.
These are private funds. It can't go to any entity for liquidity. But again, it reminds you of what I told you about first world and third world. If you look at this fund and look at the projects it finances, and actually before COVID, we had almost 1,000 laborers on different sites. And then you take people who work at the main brand itself, Cytonn Investment, another 300. So we had 1,300 people waking up every day, making a livelihood based on this particular fund. If you are to say, okay, on average, each individual is supporting 4 other people, so that's 6,000 Kenyans that were relying on this fund. COVID happened and all these 1,000 guys had to go home. So that's 1,000 laborers and livelihoods that just stopped.
Yeah.
And you can say that 1,000 supports other 3 people, so maybe 4,000 livelihoods have been affected. Now, what did the US do? In the US, what they said, given COVID, we are going to provide liquidity to private commercial paper, to private funds, such as what we have here. And what the US government was saying is, I might not care about these funds, but their livelihoods that are connected to these private funds and private commercial paper. And also there'll be a world post-COVID. If I let this private commercial paper and private funds extend, if I don't give them liquidity, when COVID comes, as a government, we are going to be digging out of a much deeper hole. So we might as well try and make sure that we save as many jobs as we can. And that is why the US government did the extraordinary thing of providing liquidity even to private funds.
Private sector.
Here, what happened? The regulator released a statement saying, by the way, we don't regulate those particular funds. So jobs get affected. You shut down your projects, and post-COVID, you are going to be digging out of a deeper hole. So what sometimes people don't realize is, in these petty fights, the people who hurt the most is not the guys that CMA has an issue with, you know. I would hate, it's the norm of, I would hate to put it, I would hate to put it this way, Lynn, but I'm lucky and privileged. You know, I went to some of the best finance schools in the world. I practiced finance in Wall Street. Edwin can always work in any city. But think of the laborer at the Alma who ends up losing a job because of politics around a private fund.
Has to pay rent, has to buy food for the family, and post-COVID, they need school fees for their kids.
So those are the people who are affected a lot. I mean, people don't realize how important capital markets are. Capital markets is where businesses go for funding. When a business can get funding and it's a sound business, it can grow. When a business grows, it employs more people. When more people are employed, the economy is growing. When more people are employed, they're able to have better standards of living for themselves and their loved ones. So Kenyans don't see it, but it's a national conversation that we need to have. Why is it that if I go borrow, I'm paying 18%? If I put my money in the bank as a deposit, I'm getting nothing. So I'm paying very high for my loans, I'm getting nothing for my deposits. It's not a banking sector issue. The issue is the capital markets that are supposed to compete with the banks, that are supposed to restrain banks, is essentially emasculated. When you have no capital markets, you end up with a dominant banking sector. That's why the Kenyan banking sector profitability is one of the highest in the world, because there is no competition in financial markets. Because financial markets are supposed to be banks and capital markets. But we have a case where there's no capital markets. We only have banking markets.
Just monopoly.
Just monopoly of one sector. Yeah. And it hurts Kenyans, but Kenyans need to understand how things are arranged so that they can begin a conversation and we end up having some sort of change.